I think we are up. And Sheryl, you are in a place to be. How's it going? Thanks for being here.
Yeah, so good to be here with you, Chris.
Yeah. So, like I was saying just before we started to record here, the reason I wanted to talk to you was because of imposter syndrome. And I think I've heard you say that everybody probably has some kind of take on it, or can relate to it in some senses. And I know recently here in the past couple of years, I've actually started to figure out what it is and how it's actually kind of impacted a little bit of my life. And yeah, so I was like, ooh, somebody who has actually wrote a book on this would be an interesting conversation, especially for me. And I think most of my listeners, but I guess we should start off maybe, a little introduction with yourself and maybe why you wrote the book, if you want to give the audience that.
Sure. Happy to. And by the way, I'll
Cool.
just show you the book. So it's The Imposter Lies Within. And I say that because I think that the cover and the name is sort of interesting because really the imposter lies within and the imposter lies within. It's a liar. But ultimately, um, I had all this business experience. I had close to 30 years in the business world. Worked for big companies, I worked for small companies, I had my own company, one of them for 20 years. So I've kind of been around that block. And I was always very interested in physical and emotional health and building great teams and that sort of thing. And so I did the deep dive into the healing arts. I'm an integrative hypnotherapist. Which all that means is that I've studied and I practice multiple modalities of hypnotherapy.
Okay.
I'm an NLP master. I did a clinical certification in stress, anxiety, and emotional regulation. I've studied the neurosciences, cognitive behavioral neuroscience. And I just like to have a lot of tools in my tool belt so that I
Sure.
can work with people individually and have more things to bring to them in a more holistic kind of whole person, whole life way. So with that, I was working with people and I was helping them with manifestation, helping them to, figure out what wasn't working. Why weren't the things that we're all taught with manifestation, do the mantras, do the affirmations, just write yourself a check. Just, think about it and you'll attract it. But why were they not working? Why were
Sure.
people still attracting what they already had, getting more of the same, or bringing in what, almost the opposite of what they wanted? And so I realized it was really like deep in the foundation, there were these limiting beliefs and blocks and fears and mixed messages going on. And I found this umbrella syndrome, the imposter syndrome,
Mm-hmm.
that really looked at those gaps, that really looks at the cracks in the foundation, why we're not really calling in the life that we truly desire, we truly want. When we say, I want this, we want it, we desire it, we even do what we think are the right things to get it. So, where does this self sabotage come from?
Ooh.
Why are we kind of missing the boat?
Ooh, yeah, a lot to play in right there. But so let's talk about that. So this is the way I would define imposter syndrome, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's basically the way I see it is maybe getting called out on your talents, so to speak, and that you might look like a fool when trying to do something, and it's like self-negative talk at the same time almost. Does that kind of make sense? Or
Well, that describes some of the thoughts and some of the behaviors
okay.
around it. Yeah, and so to really go even deeper, because that's definitely part of it. The way I describe it is as a pattern. It's a psychological pattern where somebody feels like they're not good enough, or maybe worthy or deserving,
There we go.
in spite of their accomplishments. So you're talking about having the accomplishments, really being accomplished. I'm not talking about being a beginner. I'm not talking about, oh, I'm not sure if I'm good at this. I've never done it before. I'm talking about somebody that is out there that has the accomplishments,
Mm-hmm.
and yet there's that disconnect. This they call it a cognitive dissonance. It's where your mind is not connecting to your feeling. If you think about it that way, it's just disconnected. And so we still feel like, oh my God, I'm just, somebody, for example, you do something great and you've done it over and over and over, and somebody
Sure.
says, hey, Chris, wow, that was an amazing presentation, or that was so cool the way you did this. And you might even say thank you and appear very confident. You put on your confident suit, but inside,
Mm-hmm.
there's another conversation going on in your head, that
Yep.
negative self talk, like, oh my God, they're just saying that. Oh, I was just lucky. Oh, it was just because I have these other people or these external things.
Sure.
And, it just does, and there's that anxiety. So if you made a mistake, all you can think about is that flaw, right? And it kind
Exactly.
of ruminates over and over in your mind. Oh my God, I'm such an idiot. What the heck? What did I do? And yeah. And so it's that disconnect. It's that simple. There's a disconnect. And so what I do when I look at imposter syndrome, and again, my book is 20 chapters long. There are 20 exercises. It goes through 4 stages, phases. So it's really a journey to understand what it is, get the insight, because everybody's a little bit different, right?
I agree.
Right? Understand where you're out of alignment for you, get back in alignment, and then integrate so you can really get past it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I can't remember where I was going with
No,
that.
that's perfectly okay. Just because that's exactly what I was trying to say. That like I was saying, I compete in CrossFit, and so
Yeah.
I'm not elite. I'm not elite CrossFitter, but I'm probably more advanced, and I do a lot of the regional, or well, not a regional, but more local tournaments and competitions around my area.
Yeah.
But before I really get ready to go, we usually get 3 workouts. That's usually guaranteed during your day. But each workout is like that negative self-talk comes in my head, and that I start to, like, hey, Chris, why are you here? Why are you doing this? But usually, like how it works, so like it's always up to the right moment, right before we're walking into the gym and we're getting ready to do whatever exercise, whatever we have to do. But right when that 10-second clock hits, they give us a 10-second countdown and you got to go. That's when immediately I try to flush out my brain and say, okay, dude, positive talks, you got it, you're good, you're fine. And that's just something I've kind of learned from other professionals that they've done. But it seems like a lot of people have suffered from imposter syndrome, and more than I would have ever imagined. And just kind of what you said, that I think you said before we got on here that you thought more women actually were
No, I don't. Yeah, well, I think that's one of the myths. There are a lot of
yes,
myths out there about imposter syndrome. A lot of people think it's a female phenomenon.
there
It
we go. That's
actually, yeah, men and women experience imposter syndrome almost equally,
sure.
just differently, just differently.
Exactly.
But when we like, if we can just go back, for example, to your example,
Yeah.
because I think you have a lot of people, a lot of what do you call it, CrossFitters?
CrossFitters, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. Which is really cool, by the way.
Thank you.
So, but you're performing, right? You want to go in peak performance, right? You're
Sure.
training for it, you're doing the work. And this negative self-talk, I always like to say, I never thought I was a bully until I heard the way I speak to myself. And if you think about it, would you hang out with somebody that was talking to you like that?
No, yeah, I
Would
try to push people out of my life like that, negative and toxic.
people, right? And who do you have the most influence over? Where do you have the most choice in your world?
I guess in my own world, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So, I'd like to influence my best friend. I might like to tell I really wouldn't, but as an example,
Sure.
sometimes somebody does something stupid and you're like, just stop it. And they're, but ultimately they're on their own journey. They have to do for them. But in your life, you are the writer, the director, the producer, the lead actor, the casting director of your own life, right? You get to choose. I don't actually even believe in control. I don't think there is such a thing as control. I think control is a myth. I think what we have, and if we let go of control, it's like, oh, I don't have to worry about controlling anything because actually there is no such thing as control. But I have choice.
Sure.
And I have influence. And where do I have the most choice and influence? Me,
Sure.
with my thoughts. So the first thing I would say to someone is, all right, we know this is happening. And we can actually do a deep dive into the subconscious mind, because
Okay.
usually we like to find the root of where this came from. So we can actually pull the roots out. We can change it at its inception, the origination. We can actually do that. And we want to let that kind of remodel through the timeline. But there's also, that's the inside out approach to getting past imposter syndrome. The outside in is repatterning the thoughts and the beliefs and the self talk. So the first thing you say is, let's get to what that core belief is. And most people don't come up with it the first time.
Sure.
So what's that belief? But eventually, as you start to peel back the layers, it usually gets down to this belief of not good enough,
Mm-hmm.
not worthy, not deserving.
Sure.
It doesn't have to be all of these, by the way. It's one or more.
Sure.
Sometimes it's all of them. My voice doesn't matter. I don't matter. I'm not lovable. Why would anybody love me? These are things that come from either we didn't get something we needed as a child or we got something we shouldn't have gotten.
That's what I was getting ready to ask. When you start to get to the root of the problem, does a lot of this come from childhood experiences?
Yeah. Yeah. And so when we get to that belief, even if we do the deep dive, we need to repattern the mind, because there are actually, this is the neuroscience part of this, there actually, our neurons connect and they create neural pathways, and those become patterns and habits.
Sure.
So we actually need to create new neural pathways and make the new neural pathways the more familiar, the more comfortable path for our mind to take. So that's the repatterning. So it's reprogramming and repatterning. So what I would say to somebody is, first, let's really clear that belief. Let's find out what the real belief is. So we uncover, we discover, we can use hypnotherapy, but we don't have to. We figure out what it is and where it came from. And we kind of, it's not, our beliefs are formed from our experiences, but not so much the experiences. It's the narrative, the story we gave, the meaning we gave, the interpretation we had at that age, at that stage. So you imagine the difference that a 3-year-old little boy or a 5-year-old little girl, right?
Sure.
Or a 7-year-old would have of an experience versus a 25-year-old or a 35-year-old or a 55-year-old. It's different. So we can go back. And so if somebody's had a really hard experience, trauma, even traumatic, we're not changing the experience. The experience happened, but we can go in, and we don't go into the experience itself, by the way. We never go back into a trauma, but we can go in and we can change the narrative around it. And we can change the weight and the intensity of it. And we can let that child express, because usually they've not been able to express their emotions, so they got suppressed. Right?
You're right. Is that because that, I've talked about this on here before too, but, kind of growing up that, especially with more males, that it was kind of, obviously not manly to show your feelings. And
yeah.
Yeah, and it was kind of like you talked about the narrative. Growing up, while I was a sucker for all those '80s action movies and tough guys and stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, oh man, guys don't cry. We just push it back down here and we get over it. So I think that was kind of, when I was growing up, this kind of the narrative. And like, if you started to cry, during elementary school, or you got hurt or something, you had to hold back your tears, and it was hard being vulnerable. Never really taught how to be vulnerable.
Yeah, it is hard. It's hard for both men and women, but it's especially hard for men because of conditioning and because our brains are different. Men and women's brains are actually different. So they connect differently. So men have convergent brains. They're very, that's why men want to get the goal done. They want to, get to the finish line.
Sure.
And women have divergent thinking. They have many, many more connections. They can't turn their brains off, and they run around all particular possibilities with the situation. And so anyway, that's another discussion. So part of it is conditioning. And it can be anything. Let me give you an example from my life.
Go ahead.
Give you an example. So I grew up in what most people would consider a really beautiful life, like 2 parents, nice household. We were middle class, upper middle class. I grew up on Quiet Place Drive. Seriously, who grows up on Quiet Place Drive, right? And it's kind of like Little House on the Prairie. It's kind of silly, but my parents really loved us.
Mm-hmm.
And, there was no abuse. My parents had their own dysfunction. There was dysfunction, but it wasn't serious. It wasn't bad. But here's what happened for me. When my parents would argue, my mother had a hard time showing her emotion because her parents never showed it. So she'd hold everything inside. My
Okay.
dad was very generous, very loving, very big hearted, but he had a big voice and he had a big temper. And so he would get angry and he was a yeller. He didn't mean anything by it. He loved you.
Sure.
It wasn't like he never hit, he never did anything like that, but he had a big voice. And I was a little girl. And so dad, when he would get angry about something, the way he kind of blew off steam is he'd leave, get in the car, and go for a drive. So
Well,
I'd hear the door shut.
I know how that
And for a
goes.
little girl, it sounded like it slammed. I'd hear the car turn on and drive away. And in my mind, it felt like, where did he go? What did I do? Did I do something wrong? And I was one of three kids. It wasn't me, but what did I do? Was it
Yeah, you just didn't
me?
know.
I didn't know. And is he going to come back? So it felt like abandonment. And I grew up with all this people pleasing behavior, you know, playing small and, um, wanting to never, having trouble setting boundaries, always saying yes, wanting everyone to like me,
Right.
never feeling like I belonged. And I'm not saying that's the only part of it, but that was like one of the things I was able to uncover and realize I wasn't being abandoned. So when that little girl when we were able to kind of go back and say, you know what, you weren't abandoned. It wasn't your fault. You're good, and all the stuff you can see, but abandonment is a big one.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And just I'm very similar. I was a very middle class family, and my parents got divorced when I was 3, but I never felt that I was abandoned. But I was 3 years old. I didn't really know what was going on at the time. But as I got older, I guess I kind of figured like, oh, okay, I just don't have a dad around right now. But
Yeah.
but yeah, I think I never felt those that way. But I can relate that I was also a people pleaser just because that was kind of what, I guess, I don't want to say it was a theme in my household or a rule, but it was this kind of thing that, if anybody ever asked you to do something for them, you always said yes, no matter what it was,
Yeah.
whether it was chores to go help the neighbor, or, go help, your mom's friend to move or whatever. And so even if you didn't want to do it, you always did it. And yeah, so I can relate a lot to what you were saying. And
Yeah. And it's so interesting, Chris, because when we're talking about people pleasing, the people pleaser is one of these archetypes that I talk about in my book. So I have a framework so people can understand, how imposter syndrome is showing up and
yeah.
what the traits and characteristics and behaviors are. And there are 7. And so the people pleaser is one of them. So most people wouldn't think I'm a people pleaser, that's a bad thing, or I'm a people pleaser. And what does that have to do with imposter syndrome?
Mm-hmm.
But you see, when we feel like we're not good enough, when we feel like somehow we're not worthy and we're even not sure where it goes, some of the behaviors are, I want to please everyone. I don't want to say no because if I say no, they might go away. They may not like me,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Well, that's part of
Yeah.
being a human too. You want to be good at everything and you want people to like you. And and I think, and if they don't like you, it tends to, and I think a lot of people will say that they don't care if people don't like them and stuff. But cause sometimes I wonder if that's a defense mechanism.
Yeah. I think that there's this whole concept that I talk about in the book called the healthy zone.
Okay.
So in the healthy zone, all of these behaviors are adaptive. They're not bad. They're human, as you talk about, right?
Yeah.
So being a good person, wanting to do nice, wanting to help a friend out, that's not really people pleasing, but we think of it that way. But it's just being a good human being. I'm
Yeah.
going to do what I can. If somebody needs me, I'm going to try to say yes if I can. What happens, and fear is another one. In the healthy zone, we don't really want to have no fear. Because if you had no fear, you do stupid stuff, right?
Sure.
Right? Run into you jump off cliffs. I mean, I know you guys probably do that anyway, but you run into the lines and you do things that could be really harmful. And doubt in the healthy zone is your discernment muscle. So all of these things in the healthy zone, even comparison, comparison, how do we know who we are if we don't know who we're not?
Ooh.
Comparison is a good thing in the healthy zone. It's adaptive. So people pleasing outside of the healthy zone, here's what it looks like. It means we're not sending boundaries, no boundaries. We put ourselves last in our own life.
Yep.
We subjugate ourselves to everyone else's needs, and
Hmm.
we end up losing ourselves in who we are. Now, here's the other thing that most people pleasers, when they get radically self-honest, will tell you is that they end up feeling resentful.
Mm.
So, you don't think of it, but when you go back and you look and you go, oh, yeah, I really was resentful. I really did. I mean, I did all this stuff for this person. And then look, I needed something and they didn't do it for me. They weren't there for me, or they didn't do enough for me. Or we play the martyr, right?
Yeah.
So it's maladaptive. It's not a positive trait. When you learn to set boundaries and say no, you can still be a nice person. You can still say yes when you can. But people pleasers say yes when they don't want to.
Yeah.
They say yes to people they don't want to things that they want to, but they don't have time for.
Hmm.
You see what I'm saying? So that's not healthy.
How does one would set boundaries for themselves? Is it small little things like, okay, only today I'm only gonna, I don't know, say yes to one person or help only somebody out small,
Oh,
or I'm gonna learn to say no, and you just get little small little wins.
yeah. So with all of these traits and behaviors, there are exercises for these. And for all of these exercises, I'll talk more specifically about people pleaser, but I want you to know at a kind of a higher level for all any exercises where you're trying to change a behavior. I always suggest once you know what those exercises are, doing them when the stakes are not high.
Mm.
Doing them when it's a simple thing, like I'm going to set a boundary where it really doesn't matter if I set that boundary or not, but I'm going to create those new neural pathways. I'm going to get used to saying no. I'm going to get used to saying no in a nice way. It doesn't mean you just have to be rude about it. In a professional setting at work, for example, you learn how to do it professionally. I
Sure.
might go to my boss and say, I'd love to take that on, but I have all these other things on my plate. So can we just go over my priorities and can you tell me what I can drop down on my priority list in order to do that as well? That way you're not overextending yourself. So you know what I'm saying. Or
Yeah.
you say no to a friend, you say, I'd love to, please ask me again. I would have loved to go to that movie, but I just can't tonight. I have a few other things that are priorities and we don't need to feel bad about it. With a people pleaser, when you're starting to set those boundaries and you do it again, do it when the stakes aren't high so that when things really feel like they might be difficult, you've already conditioned your brain and you're starting to feel more comfortable. It will still feel uncomfortable. But with people pleasing, especially when you're working on that one, it's a tough one because you've conditioned other people in your life to see you as the person that will always say yes. And so when you start to say no, you're going to likely get some resistance,
Oh yeah.
some
I agree.
pushback, right? Someone's going to
Sure.
go, what do you mean? You're always there. And what's wrong with you? And that's where you have to just hold it. You're very kind, you're very nice, but you say, I'm really sorry. I really
Hmm.
can't do this, or we really do need to look at that priority. You stay calm, you stay centered, you stay grounded, and you just you can say no without saying the word no, by the way. There are a lot of ways to say no. And sometimes you just have to say, no, I'm sorry, I can't do that. It's okay to say no. No is a whole sentence. But you learn to do this and you have to retrain not just your own mind, but you have to retrain those people around you. And guess what happens?
What's that? They
Well,
retrain.
you can imagine that you're going to have more peace of mind because you have
Sure.
more room for yourself in your own life. But here's another really powerful thing that happens. Other people respect you more.
Ooh, good point. I
People
never thought about
respect.
that.
Now, I want you to think about somebody in your life that's really good at setting boundaries and saying no.
Okay, I got
Do
it.
you not respect that person? You know where you stand. You know when they say no, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I do, but it's also a sense of resentment too, like you were saying too, just because I guess I know that they do that so well and I haven't mastered that. So yeah.
But that's not about them, the resentment, right? That's of
Exactly.
you, right? That's
Exactly.
maybe personalizing it, right? They're
Exactly.
saying no, are they saying no? So we have to be careful with personalizing. That's another one I talk about in the book. But the other piece of this is you gain so much self respect when you learn to say no.
Valid.
And you can learn to, when other people are setting boundaries well around you, just start to change the dialogue in your mind and start to say, wow, that is really cool. I appreciate that. Boy, I really wish they could do that thing for me, but I respect that that person knows how to set their boundaries, and be grateful that they're setting that example for you. They're giving you that model and helping you get stronger at it.
Yeah. Oh, if we go back a little bit on let's talking about the archetypes, and I think you have 7 of them. I mean,
Yes.
you in your book, do you have exercises and stuff to kind of help one identify their archetype?
Yes, I do. So there are 20 exercises throughout the book. There is an exercise explained in the book for you to, once you understand the archetypes, to start to see how they show up in your world,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, and then I also have an imposter syndrome quiz. So if you just go to my name, if you go to my website, there's a link on my website, just SherylAnjanette.com, and you can take the quiz and it gives you an imposter syndrome score and it really helps you. But would you like me to tell you what the 7 archetypes are?
Well, I know one of them is perfectionist. I was looking them up earlier,
Oh,
and
you were? Yeah.
yeah, and I related to that one too, just because the enneagram is it enneagrams. There's tests.
Yeah, the Enneagrams. Yeah.
And I was actually a type 1, I think, and that was perfectionist on there, and so I was trying to wonder if there was something relatable there.
Yeah. I mean, the perfectionist is interesting because there are 4 types of perfectionism, and 3 of them are maladaptive. 4 types of perfectionism, 3 are maladaptive. There's the self-critical perfectionist, we're
Yeah,
really hard on ourselves.
sure.
There's the other critical perfectionist. So how many perfectionists do you know that are really hard on other people in their lives? And a lot of times they're not even aware of it. I had a client who said, I'm not really a perfectionist. And then she thought about it and she said, well, but I can't let my kids put their own peanut butter and jelly on their sandwiches because they won't do it right. Right.
Yeah.
So we don't sometimes realize that we're driving other people crazy.
Yeah. How we're impacting.
And you don't have to be all 3, by the way. Or for me, the other person perfectionist, like the other perfectionist, or other oriented perfectionist is what it's called. I was really good at getting rid of that one first.
Okay.
That wasn't hard for me. I just learned to really give people grace and space, but it was very difficult for me to stop being hard on myself. And then there's the social perfectionist, and that really is somebody that can come from family dynamics, that can come from culture. Many cultures like expect a certain level of perfectionism in that culture or that family dynamic.
Exactly.
And then there are professions, right? Like lawyers and doctors and architects. My husband's an architect.
Nice.
And engineers. And there's just like such, it's a lot of pressure to be perfect.
Yeah.
And the one that's adaptive, I don't even like to call perfectionism because, but what's different is when somebody is really detail oriented and they set their standards higher, but they aren't depleted by it. They actually are energized by it. So most of us, if we really look at our energy levels, we're not tired, we're depleted. There's a difference.
That makes sense.
You know what I mean? When you're tired, you're tired. You worked out hard, you worked hard during the day, get a good night's sleep. When you're depleted, you feel drained. That's different.
Yeah, I agree 100%. But, my next question because, in working with, these self-doubts and self-sabotage almost that, I overcome it just by talking with people like you and learning what others have done and stuff. But do you think that the older a person gets, the more, what's it, a control way? I know you said you don't really believe in control, but the more they actually have it, they can figure out how it works for them and how to get over or get past imposter syndrome on themselves.
Oh, I think that's a great question. I thought it was going to go the other way.
Oh.
I thought you were going to ask me as you get older and you get more set in your ways.
Well, I guess, that's true too, but I would think that with life experiences and life, like for me, I'm going to be 36 next month, but I've, like I said, I've been doing CrossFit for 8 years now. And whenever this negative self-talk and stuff starts to come up, I kind of know how, like I said, right when I hear the 10-second clock, I know to completely get it out of my head. That's like my red stop sign. So I was just thinking like as I got, because I never really knew much about it until these last few years, but even before like my high school days and growing up that, I felt like it was harder, but now, I feel it's easier to get
So there are a
sense
couple
of.
things about that. First of all, 36 is the best age.
Well, thank you.
I loved my 30s. And I think back to like 36, 37. That's a great age. And I mean, I'm like going, just enjoy every second of this.
Mm-hmm.
If you're having ruminating thoughts or self-doubt, I want you to just focus on that. Do that inner work now so that you can just be smooth sailing ahead, because you have the best years ahead of you. The best.
Right.
This is like the best time. The 20s are hard for
Mm-hmm.
all of us because we're really figuring it out. We're
Sure.
out there on our own. Many people say it's more difficult now. I think it's difficult in different ways for this generation than it was for my generation, than it was for my parents' generation. We all had our own set of external circumstances,
I agree.
but there's a lot coming at us in our society right now. There's just a lot. It's overload on input, decision making, what have you. When you get past imposter syndrome, you become a much better decision maker.
Yeah.
You become much better at, being okay with not knowing certain things. So when you're in your 20s, I don't know if you know this, but men's brains are not fully
It's like
developed.
24 or 25, right? The frontal lobe or something.
It's actually, women are more like 24.
Okay.
Men are more like 28,
Oh.
29.
Oh,
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
So they're still better at 24 than they were. You can see a big difference. I raised a son. My son is 28.
Okay.
So yeah. But it takes a little bit. And that's because your executive function that's like right behind your forehead, that prefrontal cortex, that's the executive function. That's the part of your brain that makes good decisions.
Okay.
And the connections just aren't there to the back of the brain.
That makes sense.
Hippocampus and yeah. And so when those get connected, fully connected, I mean, it's a physiological thing. It happens to every single male brain. It's not like anybody's, it's not a judgment. It's not a good or bad thing. It's just the way we develop, as little kids. We don't have chest hair, I hope, at 5 years old, right?
Yeah.
And if you're a woman, I hope you never have chest hair, but
Me too.
But
Me too.
you know what I'm saying? I mean,
Exactly.
It's just a physiological thing. And so we have to realize that. But when you get into your 30s, if you're not too hard on yourself, because there is still a lot of stress, like men are suddenly, not just men, women too, and women more, thank goodness, in the workplace equally,
Mhm.
or getting there. We're driven. It's like our time to create, to go, to figure out what we want to do with our life, and perhaps creating a family or moving in that direction or what have you. Those are the kinds of decisions we're making, right? They're different than in the 20s. And
Yeah.
everybody's a little bit different, and that changes. So you're at a great time in your life. Your brain is fully developed, and
Some might
the
argue.
mind is ready and aware, because awareness is always the first step that there could be some things that are out of alignment. And if you start with awareness, see,
Mhm.
that's what the book goes. It goes through a journey from awareness. There's 5 chapters just about awareness. And then insight, that's where we do the deep dive into the subconscious mind, and we talk about inner child and all
Okay.
these things. And you get really clear about you and your own story and stories.
Do you
And
think a lot of people are not very self-aware of themselves in modern times?
I think that
Or they just haven't found themselves, kind of what you're saying?
I can't say most people, because I don't know most people.
Mhm.
And most of the people I hang out with and hang around or are attracted to me are they're on the journey to awareness. Like they're aware. But I'll tell you, in the very beginning of my book, I'm going to read this to you.
Okay.
It's this I talk about before each of the the sections. I talk about that section. What does that mean? And in this one, it says awareness, which is just pertinent to your question. This is where it all starts, where everything begins with awareness. We don't know what we don't know, even when we think we do.
Mm-hmm.
So let's explore it. And that's where we get into it. And I think that's really important. When we can just let go of this control, we can let go of thinking, when we're 20s, we think we know everything.
Sure.
As you get older, you kind of think you don't know anything, and that's a good thing. Because you get curious again, you get back curious, and you get more open again, and then you're growing. When you're curious, you're growing.
Yeah.
And when you're curious, you get creative. When you're closed and you think you know everything, you get into worry and you get to anxiety and you get down the wrong path. So I really like this idea of we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
Even when we think we do. And so I got this idea very early in my life, in my 20s. And so what I will always do, even when I have everything in front of me and I think I've got my game plan, all in my mind think, what is it that I don't know?
Mm-hmm.
Let's just lift the covers a little more.
Yeah.
And now with the getting past imposter syndrome, if I start to make assumptions like, I wonder what he thinks. Oh, he probably isn't interested. Oh, she probably is mad at me or whatever. Now in my mind, I think, oh, that's an assumption. I really don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
I've heard that before. The smarter you are, the more you know what you don't know. And
yeah.
I've heard that maybe in the last year, and I was like, that makes perfect sense. And
Yeah.
I mean, even somewhere down the road, I picked up, Socrates even said it. I forgot one point of his life. He found out that he knows nothing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wise. Yeah. So fear screams in the head while wisdom whispers in the heart. So we have to get out of our head because there's so much noise there.
Mm-hmm.
And we just take that. It's a really short journey. You just take a deep breath, really deep, hold it, and just let yourself drop into your heart.
Yeah.
And that's where you can get more congruent, more aligned.
Yeah. A person can be their own worst enemy, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And that's one thing that's another thing I've been learning too. It's like, how do you get out of your own way and stop being your own worst enemy? And, and going back to what you're talking about being driven and stuff. And, I found out that I'm pretty self-critical of myself, but I also find out that really drives me to, keep doing things and challenging myself and overcome, try to meet my goals just because that, I feel like I don't want to be, a lazy person. I want to get to a certain goal. One of my goals is to probably try to become a centurion and live to 100 years old, hopefully. So, yeah, like when I do these podcasts and stuff, I don't go back and listen back to, usually I just edit little pieces in them, but I don't really listen to the whole conversation just because I don't want to say, oh man, you said that wrong. Oh, why'd you say that was dumb? Just because I know that, it would just, sabotage me almost. So that's kind of another way I've worked around that.
There's another way. So did you ever watch Ted Lasso?
God, I love that show.
Right.
That's when my
so crazy how that caught on, but right. So when there are a lot of voices in our head, but for some reason the critic takes front center and everyone gets pushed to the back. So what if you put the critic in the back and you pulled out your coach, like your very best coach that drives you and makes you feel good about what you're doing?
Mm-hmm.
Could you get to the same place and could you be more energized? Would you be more energized? I mean, ultimately, it's everyone's choice who they want to keep in their head. Everyone's choice,
sure,
who they want to be the loudest voice. So in the book is, the imposter lies within, but it's silence your inner critic, tame your fear, unleash your badassery. And the idea is that, you know what, I'd rather, if I could hang out with someone, and yeah, I'm a really driven person. I love to make things happen. But I don't need somebody like screaming at me to do 20 burpees and telling me what a piece of shit I am if I don't do it, and that I'm, not worth anything in order to be driven. I'd rather have somebody say, wow, I mean, you rock. this is amazing. Please do more of what you're doing. You've got this. You
Hmm.
can do it. Go. Believe, right? Believe in yourself. And so if you had your coach in your head or you had a different voice in your head, could you be as driven? Could you be more driven? Could you be more energized by that? Only you can answer that question for
Yeah,
you.
that's a great question. Just because I do wonder if you did have somebody in there just accepting and giving, applauding yourself on it or applauding you on the back and stuff. And, would that really drive you anymore? Because, if like, oh, I met it, I'm good. I can lay off a little bit, but, and I'm the same way, when I'm doing my work and stuff, I don't need anybody in my face. And, I'm very self-driven just because I know what I'm working towards and I have goals. But I think there are some people who need that, but I'm
Yeah.
not one of them. But yeah, but I guess maybe that all depends on the person and, what we've been talking about over this time, maybe what life has taught them and what pathway they went down and stuff. But
Well, yeah, and here's what happens too, Chris. So if you're a certain way and you don't know another way, no one's giving you other options,
mhm.
your mind is going to do whatever it can to make you right. So we come up with really good explanations like, well, this is really good for me. This is actually driving me,
um,
but because I didn't have another option. I still want to get the same result, maybe even a better result, but I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose that drive. And so I'm going to tell myself a good story. And that good story may not really be a good story. It's kind of like in my myth section, chapter 2. A lot of people say, well, imposter syndrome's a good thing. It drives you. Doubt is good. When you doubt yourself, it's going to drive you to do better. Well, in the healthy zone, doubt is your discernment muscle and it's adaptive. And we want to have a little bit of doubt. It keeps your ego in check.
yeah,
But when
there we
it's
go.
maladaptive and you're ruminating, those thoughts are just looping and you're doubting everything about yourself and that's not good.
No. Yeah, I think that's where maybe I found a balance with it, kind of what I was saying that I don't doubt myself all the time, but I know that if I do, like I said, if I lay off, that's like, you're not getting any better, dude. You got to, stay on the ground. You got to keep
Yeah.
going. But
That's adaptive though. See what I
yeah,
just heard. You just told yourself, you got to go, guy. Come
yeah,
on, let's
that's
do
that's
it.
like my thing. It's
I
like,
talk to myself like that. I don't say guy, but yeah.
yeah, same difference. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's what also drives me, I think, because I know, I try to keep negative and toxic people out of my life. And so that if I am thinking like that, it's like, all right, you're doing this, now drive, get it going, dude. This is what you got to do. This is what do you want to do tomorrow? Don't you want to, be able to walk around and, take your dogs for walks and when you get old and all that good stuff, pick up your kids and
Yes.
all that. So yeah, it's like, it's my factor. And it's like, there we go. You
That's
found
so
my
awesome. I have to try CrossFit. I love that idea. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mean, the way I approach it is that, that was my thing when I first went into my first CrossFit class. Like I wanted to be great at it, I wanted to be good at it. And so that's what drove me, and that's why I wanted to start competing just because I saw other people and I was like, ooh, this is so much fun, and it was like
Yeah.
my competitive mind needed that at the time, leaving
Yeah.
college and all that. But, a lot of people say, well, I don't want to do, bar muscle ups and 20 burpees and stuff, but that's where, and we don't have to make this a CrossFit talk, but that's where just say, go in and just make it a workout. Then just say, hey, I'm just want to,
I don't like burpees.
I know I don't
hate
either.
burpees. I friggin' hate burpees.
I don't blame you. I don't either.
I
Nobody.
used to do boot camps and it was like, oh God.
But yeah,
It's like
just
the one thing I could do anything else. Well, I can't do the pull-ups because I don't have that upper arm strength.
it's okay. So yeah, you don't have to, you just get a workout in. That's all it is. Just work out and just be healthy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if that's my definition of it, and I've felt a good balance in my life with it, and yeah, there was times where I was a little extreme with it, but now it's when I've gotten older, kind of what I was asking about, that I found a good balance with it. It works for me now, and it works for my lifestyle, and
I
I'm
love
enjoying
it.
it. Yeah, and that's what and if that's not if burn body boot camp or boot camp, whatever you just said you were doing, if that's what your health is, that's great. Ooh.
Yeah, I haven't done that for a while, but yeah, I do like to stay in shape. I like to work out.
Yeah, and it just, my mind needs it. It's, I love exerting myself, get a little energy out, and it's just easy. It's just clears my head. It makes sense to me, reloads, get some stress off me.
Yeah,
And,
definitely.
yeah, like I said,
Oh, I love it.
just makes sense to me. And, I've made it part of my life. And yeah.
Yeah. And I think we were talking about mental fitness, right?
Yeah,
This
there
is
we go.
maybe
Yeah.
what you and I are talking about is like the mental fitness, but physical fitness is a big part of mental fitness
Hmm.
because that's what keeps your brain young. That's what creates neurogenesis,
Yeah.
the new neurons, new brain cells, new creation and gets oxygen to your brain. And, especially for men, you have to spend that testosterone. It gets you kind of like
Hmm.
gets that out. And it's just such a positive thing. So
And going off that, Sheryl, that I forgot his name, but it was a doctor talking on a podcast, and he's talking about challenge yourself like that, and challenging your
yes.
mind, and over time, and that leads to longevity. And I'm not saying you have to go out there and climb Mount Everest or anything, but just doing little challenges day by day, and just keeping your mind, would you say building new neural pathways and stuff?
Yeah. So let me bring that one right back to imposter syndrome for
Okay.
you. So one of the myths about imposter syndrome is that it's just for people when they're doing something new. They're for the newbies
Mm.
or somebody that's done something a long time, but suddenly they're in a new position in their job or they're trying something new and they feel like the imposter. Well, it's natural, right?
Sure.
When we're doing something new for the first time, we're kind of climbing that competency staircase.
I
We
agree.
might slip back a little. We're going to have some doubt. We're going to have some fears. We're going to question ourselves. We're on a learning curve. That's normal. That's completely normal. Um, People that experience imposter syndrome, they've had accomplishments. Now, you don't have to be old to have them. You can be, 12 years old and be the guy that did whatever. But
Want a spelling bee?
yeah, but you can do that same thing over and over that you're already really good at and feel like you're still not good enough and you're never going to be good enough. And maybe they're just lying and maybe it's just luck. So, with imposter syndrome, one of the exercises I encourage everyone to do is always be a beginner at something all the time so that you're continually creating new neurons, new neural pathways. So your brain is used to that, right?
Hmm.
You
I
do
agree
it,
100%.
it keeps your brain young, but it also means when you go into something new, you're already used to being a beginner.
Yeah.
It's in Zen, they call it the beginner's mindset.
Mm.
The beginner's mindset. And so rather than going to, oh no, I'm not good enough, or what about this? You go into this place of curiosity and expectation. Like a kid would. Think about a kid when
Mhm.
they're trying something new before they become too self-aware and
Yeah, they have no
self-conscious,
shame.
right? They're just out there, they're having a
Exactly.
blast, they fall down, they're like,
No shame.
what else should I do? Let me do that. And they're just right.
Yeah.
So but they're curious. They're curious and they get creative. They do the most creative things. I mean, if you go back and think about yourself as a kid,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, think
Yeah.
about the things you used to build out of sticks and stones and whatever it
Mhm.
was out in the
Yeah.
backyard and the
Wow.
bugs and the way you'd make your little ants and your bugs be the armies and whatever you did as little boys, right?
Sure.
But that's really creative. And so if you can embrace this beginner's mindset with creativity, my husband does puzzles every day, every single
See,
day.
that's good. That's great.
He's got a new puzzle going. He does it almost to relax, even though it's not in my mind that relaxing. But it's like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, I have to figure something new out now.
Yeah. I do Wordle every day now.
That's cool. See?
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I know that's
Yeah.
not a puzzle, but it's fun to do. It's just why I drink my coffee in the mornings and get my brain going a little bit.
But it gets your brain going and it
Exactly.
makes you kind of right.
Yeah. Then I get a small win for the day and it's like, got it. Sometimes I don't get it, but if I get the word, I feel good about myself, starting the day right.
Yeah. And small wins are great because every time you get a small win, you get a dopamine hit.
Mm-hmm.
So anytime you're feeling like you're in overwhelm or you're not sure what to do, just do a little something where you can kind of tie the bow. You
Yeah.
can do that thing, get your little dopamine hit, and then move on to the next thing.
Yeah, that's what I try to. I know we're getting kind of short on time here, but I know that's kind of what I tell people when they're trying to something new. And I said, you don't have to go out there and do anything wild and crazy. If you want to, learn to walk or try to start walking, 3 miles, just start walking a lap around your neighborhood. Start by that.
That's right.
And build off
That's
that.
exactly right.
Do that for a week. The next week, maybe do 2 laps. And get small wins, and then eventually you'll see that you can do it. It's just a matter of just challenging yourself.
Yeah, I remember when my freshman year in college, I remember that we had a pool. And so all the girls in my suite wanted to go swim laps. And I was like, oh, I hate to swim. I don't want to swim. But I went because my friends were going. And I was the only one that continued. And I dive into the water, and the first 10 laps were excruciating.
I don't doubt it.
And then I'd get to 20. And then all of a sudden, I was swimming 200 laps. I just got past the threshold.
That's impressive.
And I was doing it every day. And I just got past the threshold,
Yeah.
So sometimes you just have to kind of push through that uncomfortable piece until you're in the zone. You understand this. So the zone, that kind of being in flow, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you get into flow, like maybe you get that runner's high, or you get whatever that is. That can be true just in life with anything you do with mental fitness. You just embrace the uncomfortable. You don't see it as bad. You just go, okay, this is supposed to be uncomfortable.
Exactly.
And that's the thing, because when I get to the other side, I'm going to start to really sail along and, set my boundaries really well and have this different kind of lease on life and, not be the perfectionist. I'm going to let things go, and I'm not going to worry about it too much. I'm going to laugh at it. I'm going to make mistakes, and I'm going to think, wow, that makes me more human, doesn't it? That makes me so much more approachable. That's cool.
For sure. Sheryl, I think we should take it home on that. That's a good note to end this on, I think, right there. If people want to find a book, find you, plug all that stuff, and where do they do that at and all that good stuff?
Yeah. So easy to find me if you know how to spell my name. So it's Sheryl with an S, Sheryl, Anjanette, Anjanette. You can find me on Instagram, LinkedIn. I'm not too big on TikTok, but I'm trying to get there. Not so much, huh?
I don't do TikTok either.
Yeah, but you can find me there. You can find my website. The quiz is really great. I encourage you to take the quiz. You can go to Amazon for the book, The Imposter Lies Within. If you're watching this and not just listening, that's the book. Am I getting that in the scene?
Yeah,
there we go.
That's it right there.
Yeah, and and I'm very approachable, and
Great.
Anybody that DMs me, I respond personally. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you for doing this. Thank you for taking the time and having a little conversation with me tonight. This was great.
Thank you, Chris. It's been amazing.
Okay. All right, everyone, we're out of here. Be good to yourselves.